I was supposed to be in Chicago by now, sitting across from the board of directors, presenting our quarterly cybersecurity assessment. Instead, I was standing in my kitchen at 11:47 in the morning on a Tuesday, staring at the laptop I'd left charging on the counter, wondering why I'd heard my husband's voice coming from his home office when he'd told me 2 hours ago he was flying to Boston for a client meeting. The flight. He'd mentioned it at breakfast. 6:30 departure. Important pharmaceutical client. Would be back Thursday night. He'd kissed my forehead, grabbed his travel bag, and left while I was still reviewing presentation notes over coffee. I'd watched him pull out of the driveway in his Tesla, heading toward the airport. Except now it was almost noon, and I'd just heard him laugh, that particular laugh he reserved for phone calls with people he was trying to charm coming from the direction of his office upstairs. My own flight had been delayed, then cancelled. Some issue with the aircraft. They'd rebooked me on a 4 o'clock flight, which meant I'd had time to come home, change into more comfortable clothes, maybe grab a real lunch instead of airport food. I'd driven back to our house in Westchester, punched in the security code, disarmed the alarm system like always. The house should have been empty. I stood very still, my hand still on my laptop case, listening. The central air hummed. The refrigerator cycled on. And from upstairs, faintly, I heard Marcus's voice again. Not the words, just the cadence. The tone. That smooth, confident tone he used in business calls. Maybe his flight got cancelled too. Maybe he came home, was taking calls from here. Perfectly reasonable explanation. Except he would have texted me. We always texted. Flight delayed. At the gate. Landed. It was our routine, built over 7 years of marriage, countless business trips, the small communication rituals that kept us connected across time zones and busy schedules. I pulled out my phone. No texts from Marcus since this morning's love you, have a great presentation. I checked his calendar. We shared calendars, another one of those marriage efficiency things we'd implemented early on. His calendar showed him in Boston, client meeting from 9 to 5. The voice upstairs laughed again. My hands had started to shake, just slightly. I set down my laptop case very carefully on the counter, the kind of careful you use when you're trying not to make assumptions, trying not to let your mind spiral into places it shouldn't go. There was an explanation. Had to be. Marcus was many things: intense, driven, sometimes distant when he was deep in a case, but he wasn't a liar. We'd built our marriage on honesty, on trust, on the kind of partnership that made sense for two people who'd both put career first for so long that everyone else thought we'd never settle down. I took off my heels, left them by the counter. The hardwood was cool under my feet as I moved toward the stairs. Our house had good bones, that's what the realtor had said when we bought it 3 years ago. Good bones, solid construction, the kind of place that appreciated in value. The kind of place where sounds carried, where you could hear someone moving around upstairs if you were paying attention. I was paying attention now. The stairs didn't creak. We'd had them refinished last year. I climbed slowly, my right hand trailing along the banister, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. Not quite panic. Not yet. Just this tight, anxious feeling, like waiting for test results you're pretty sure are going to be bad. His office door was closed but not latched. A thin line of light showed at the bottom. I could hear him clearly now, his voice low but animated. I know. But listen, we're in the final stretch now. 2 more weeks, maybe 3. The escrow closes on the 28th, and after that. A pause. No, she doesn't suspect anything. Why would she? I've been careful. We've both been careful. I stopped breathing. The prenup was airtight, but that's why we structured everything through the LLC. Her name's not on any of it. And with the power of attorney in place for her mother. Another pause. Another laugh. Yeah, I know. I'm a genius. Tell me something I don't know. The person on the other end must have said something funny, because Marcus laughed again, that full, genuine laugh I used to love hearing. Look, once this goes through, we're set. The house alone is worth 2.3, clear title. The mother's investments are worth another $800K. And Elena's so busy with her own career she barely notices what I'm doing with the family finances. It's almost too easy. Elena. My name in his mouth, casual, dismissive. The way you'd say the name of someone you were actively working to destroy. I put my hand against the wall to steady myself. The plaster was cool and solid under my palm. Real. This was real. This conversation was happening. Sienna, babe, relax. I've got this under control. 7 years I've been playing this game, and she still thinks I married her for love. He laughed again, and this time the sound made my stomach turn. Who marries a workaholic cybersecurity executive for love? Come on. I married a paycheck that came with a bonus mother-in-law investment portfolio. 7 years. Our entire marriage. Every anniversary, every vacation, every quiet morning over coffee, every night tangled together in bed, all of it, apparently, had been a performance. A long con. And Sienna. A woman's name. Of course, there was another woman. I've got to go, Marcus said, his voice changing, becoming more businesslike. Need to make it look like I'm actually in Boston in case anyone checks. I'll call you tonight after she's asleep. Love you too. I heard movement inside the office. The creak of his desk chair. Footsteps heading toward the door. I moved fast, years of emergency response training kicking in. Down the hallway, into our bedroom, closing the door to just a crack. Through the gap, I watched Marcus emerge from his office, phone still in his hand, smiling at the screen as he typed something. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt, not the suit he'd left in this morning. His travel bag wasn't anywhere in sight. He headed downstairs, whistling. I waited until I heard him in the kitchen, heard the refrigerator open, before I moved. Back down the hallway to his office, quick and silent. The door was still open. His laptop sat on his desk, screen awake. He'd been working on something spreadsheets. Lots of numbers. I couldn't look at it now, didn't have time, but I pulled out my phone and took photos. The screen. The papers scattered on his desk. A folder labeled Cayman Holdings LLC, sitting open with documents visible. More photos. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Where are you? Thought you were flying to Chicago. I stared at the message. He was downstairs. He knew I was home, my car was in the driveway. He'd seen it when he looked out the window or checked the security camera app. This text was theater, establishing his story. I typed back. Flight cancelled. Coming home to regroup. Where are you? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Boston, babe. Client meeting running long. Miss you. I stood in his office, looking at the evidence of his lies scattered across his desk, and something cold settled into my chest. Not panic. Not anymore. Clarity. This was what I did for a living. I assessed risk. I identified threats. I developed response strategies. I'd spent 15 years building my career on my ability to think clearly under pressure, to see the patterns others missed, to understand how bad actors operated. And I'd been living with one for 7 years. I took more photos. Documents. Laptop screen showing email threads. A handwritten note about transfer schedules and Belize account routing. Everything I could see, I documented. Then I left his office exactly as I'd found it, went to our bedroom, changed into the yoga pants and t-shirt I'd planned to change into anyway, and went downstairs. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen counter, eating a sandwich, my laptop case moved aside. He looked up when I came in, smiled like nothing was wrong. Hey! I thought you were flying out this morning? Cancelled flight, I said, keeping my voice normal. 7 years of marriage meant I knew exactly how I was supposed to sound. Frustrated but resigned. They rebooked me for 4, so I came home to change and grab some work time. How's Boston? Something flickered in his eyes. Just for a second. Then the smile widened. You know how these pharmaceutical guys are. Everything's urgent until you're in the room, then suddenly they want to discuss their golf game. But the weather's nice. That's good, I said. I went to the refrigerator, pulled out ingredients for a salad, started chopping vegetables with steady hands. You'll be back Thursday? That's the plan. Miss you already. Miss you too. We'd gotten good at this, I realized. The performance of marriage. The small lies and automatic responses. How was your day? Fine. Love you. Love you too. Maybe we'd always been performing, both of us, just in different ways for different reasons. I made my salad. I ate it standing at the counter, checking emails on my phone, playing the role of the busy executive who barely had time to breathe. Marcus finished his sandwich, rinsed his plate, kissed my cheek. I should get back to the hotel. Prep for tomorrow's session. Text me when you land? Of course. I watched him leave through the front door, watched him get into his Tesla and pull out of the driveway. Going where? Not to Boston. Maybe to Sienna's place, wherever that was. Maybe to another meeting about whatever scheme they were running. Once he was gone, I sat down at the counter with my laptop and started working. Not on my presentation. That could wait. I opened a secure browser, logged into accounts I hadn't checked in months, my mother's investment portfolio, which Marcus had convinced me 2 years ago to let him optimize through his financial advisor contacts. The family trust my grandmother had left me, which Marcus had suggested we restructure for tax efficiency. It took me 3 hours to see the full picture. The money trail was sophisticated. Marcus had clearly learned from whatever previous cons he'd run, but it was there. My mother's portfolio had been systematically liquidated, the funds transferred through a series of shell companies into accounts I didn't recognize. The family trust had been used as collateral for loans I'd never approved. The house, my grandmother's house, which I'd inherited and which Marcus and I had supposedly refinanced last year for better rates, had a second mortgage I'd never signed off on. Except I had signed off on it. I found the documents. My signature, witnessed and notarized. Papers Marcus had brought home during one of my insane work weeks, stuck in front of me with just trust stuff. Honey, the lawyers need your signature explanations. And I'd signed. Because I trusted him. Because he was my husband. Because I'd been so deep in a security breach crisis at work that I'd barely been sleeping, and he'd been so understanding, so supportive, taking care of all the boring family finances so I could focus on my career. The power of attorney for my mother's affairs. Also signed during a crisis period when Mom had been in the hospital last year for emergency surgery, and Marcus had so helpfully organized all the medical and financial documents we'd need. Just in case, he'd said. And I'd signed, grateful he was handling it. I'd made it so easy for him. By the time I had to leave for the airport, I had a complete picture. Marcus, if that was even his real name, had been systematically stealing from me and my mother for at least 3 years, possibly longer. The LLC in Cayman was his and Sienna's. The house refinancing was a fraud. The investment optimization was theft. All legal looking, all documented, all signed off on by me in moments when I'd been too busy or too trusting to look closely. The total? Somewhere north of $3 million. I drove to the airport, checked in for my flight, went through security. I sat in the departure lounge and called my best friend Vanessa, who was an attorney specializing in white-collar crime. I need help, I said when she answered. I need legal help, and I need you to not ask questions until I'm back in New York. Can you clear your schedule for Friday? Vanessa and I had been friends since law school. She knew when I was serious. Done. You okay? I will be. I'm about to be very okay. But I need help getting there. Whatever you need. On the plane to Chicago, I didn't work on my presentation. I built a timeline. Every document I'd signed. Every conversation I could remember about finances. Every time Marcus had steered me away from looking too closely at accounts, always with reasonable explanations. The time he'd suggested I was too stressed about work to worry about household finances. The time he'd convinced me that hiring his financial advisor friend was taking something off my plate. The time he'd praised me for being so focused on my career, so admirably driven, while he handled the boring life admin stuff. He'd been grooming me. That was the technical term. Identifying my vulnerabilities, my overwork, my trust in him, my desire to not think about family finances, and exploiting them systematically. I gave my presentation in Chicago on Wednesday. I nailed it. The board approved our security recommendations with full funding. My boss congratulated me on another excellent quarter. I smiled, thanked everyone, went back to my hotel room and continued building my case. Thursday afternoon, I flew back to New York. Marcus texted. Landing at 7. Home by 8. Want me to grab dinner? I texted back. Sure. Whatever you want. I got home at 6. The house was exactly as I'd left it. I went straight to his office, spent 2 hours going through everything more carefully this time. Found the real estate documents for a condo in Manhattan I'd never heard of. Found bank statements for accounts in both his and Sienna's names. Found a second phone hidden in his desk drawer, an iPhone with a different number, full of text messages between him and Sienna planning their exit strategy. According to the messages, the plan was to close on the condo sale, my grandmother's house, which he'd somehow gotten retitled in his name, then trigger a divorce. By the time I realized what had happened, he and Sienna would be in Belize with my family's money, and I'd be left fighting legal battles I couldn't win because I'd signed everything. The divorce filing was already drafted. He was planning to serve me next month. I photographed everything. Then I called Vanessa. "Are you alone?" she asked immediately. "Yes. He'll be home in 2 hours. I need to know legally, what's my play here? Do not confront him. Do not let him know you know. We need to move fast, but we need to move smart. Can you get me copies of everything tonight?" "Already done. I'll email them encrypted." "Good. Listen to me carefully. Tomorrow morning, you're going to file for an emergency restraining order based on financial abuse. We're going to freeze every account, put a stop on every transaction, and get a forensic accountant involved. But tonight, you play it normal. Can you do that?" I thought about Marcus's laugh on the phone. About the casual way he'd said my name. About 7 years of lies. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." He came home at 8:15 with Thai food. We ate at the kitchen counter. He told me about his Boston trip, an elaborate fiction involving client dinners and hotel room service. He asked about my presentation. I told him about the board meeting, the approval, the compliments. "That's my girl," he said, squeezing my hand. "Always crushing it." We watched a movie. Some thriller where the bad guy almost got away with it. Marcus made popcorn. I curled up next to him on the couch, his arm around my shoulders. "Everything exactly like always. I love you," he said when the movie ended. "Love you too," I said. Friday morning, I left for work at 7:30 like always. Marcus was still asleep. By 9, I had filed for the restraining order with Vanessa's help. By 10, the emergency hearing was scheduled for that afternoon. By 11, every financial account Marcus had touched, ours, mine, my mother's, was frozen, pending investigation. By noon, Vanessa had tracked down Marcus's real identity. His name wasn't Marcus Chen. It was Michael Kowalski. He had 2 prior fraud convictions, served time in Florida, and had been working variations of this same marriage and theft scheme for 15 years. Sienna was his actual wife. They'd never divorced. They'd done this to at least 4 other women before me. The court hearing at 3 o'clock was quick. The judge reviewed the evidence, the hidden accounts, the forged documents, the power of attorney abuse, Michael's criminal history, and granted everything we'd asked for. Full asset freeze. Emergency restraining order. Criminal investigation referral to the district attorney. I drove home at 5. There were police cars in my driveway. Vanessa had coordinated everything with law enforcement. They'd arrested Michael Marcus at 4:15 when he tried to make a large transfer to his Belize account and discovered everything was frozen. Detective Morrison met me at the door. "Mrs. Chen? We need your statement." "It's Miss Reeves," I said. I never changed my name. They'd found Marcus in his office, surrounded by evidence he'd been frantically trying to destroy. The second phone. Printed documents. USB drives. All of it now in police custody. "He's asking for his lawyer," Detective Morrison said. "Keeps insisting it's all a misunderstanding." "I'm sure he does." They took my statement. 3 hours of questions, walking them through everything: how we'd met at a charity gala 7 years ago, his charming pursuit, the whirlwind romance, the marriage, the gradual integration of our finances. How he'd been so supportive of my career, so understanding of my long hours, so willing to handle things so I could focus on work. How every signature I'd given him had been framed as helping, as partnership, as trust. "Did you suspect anything before Tuesday?" Detective Morrison asked. "No," I said. "That's what made it work. He was good. Very good. If I hadn't come home unexpectedly, if I hadn't heard that phone call." I stopped. But I did. And once I knew what to look for, everything was right there. That was the thing about security work. Once you saw the vulnerability, you couldn't unsee it. The pattern emerged. The attack vector became obvious. I just never thought to look for vulnerabilities in my own marriage. The police left around 9. Vanessa stayed, ordered pizza, opened a bottle of wine. "How are you feeling?" "Numb," I said. "Angry. Stupid. Relieved. All of it." "You're not stupid. He's a professional con artist. This is what he does. I'm a cybersecurity expert, Van." I literally teach people how to spot social engineering attacks. And I fell for the oldest social engineering attack there is: trust and affection. Yeah. Well. That's what makes it work. The best attacks exploit human nature, not technical vulnerabilities. She poured me more wine. You're going to be okay. We're going to get your money back, most of it anyway. The DA's building a solid case. And you caught it before he could disappear. Only because I forgot my passport. I laughed, but it came out shaky. My whole life changed because of a cancelled flight and a forgotten passport. Fate, Vanessa said. Or luck. Or just good timing. Whatever it was, take it. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings, forensic accounting, victim statements. Michael Kowalski, I couldn't think of him as Marcus anymore, had stolen nearly $3 million from me and my mother. We recovered about 70% of it. The rest was gone, spent or hidden in accounts we couldn't trace. He got 12 years. Sienna got 8. The DA said there might be other victims who would come forward now. I gave interviews, talked to federal investigators, helped them understand the patterns and techniques he'd used. My mother moved in with me for a while. Her house, the one he'd stolen and tried to sell, was restored to her name. The second mortgage was invalidated as fraud. She was shaken but stable, kept apologizing for trusting him with her finances. Mom, I said. I trusted him too. I married him. This isn't on you. He seemed so nice, she said. So devoted to you. That was the point. That's what good con artists do. My company was supportive. My boss actually praised how I'd handled it. You used your training, he said. You saw the threat, assessed it, responded appropriately. That's what we train for. Except I'd missed the threat for 7 years. It took me a long time to trust my judgment again. To stop replaying every moment, every conversation, looking for signs I should have seen. Vanessa finally grabbed my shoulders one night, 6 months after the trial, and said, "Stop. You have to stop. He was a predator. Predators are good at hiding. That's the whole point. You caught him. That's what matters. I caught him by accident. No. You caught him because when you saw the evidence, you didn't explain it away. You didn't make excuses. You looked at it clearly and took action. Most people don't do that. Most people want to believe the lie." Maybe she was right. I sold the house in Westchester. Too many ghosts. Bought a condo in Manhattan, smaller but mine. Put better security systems in place, cameras, alarms, redundancies. Vanessa joked that I'd turned my home into a fortress. Fort Knox, I said. But with better wine. I dated again, eventually. Carefully. Background checks before the second date. Which I knew was paranoid but couldn't stop doing. Transparent about my history, which scared some people off and intrigued others. You got taken by a con artist? One date said. Doesn't that worry you? Like, you work in security. Does a doctor who gets cancer worry you? I said. Bad things happen to experts too. It just means I know what to watch for now. He didn't call again. That was fine. The date who did call again was Nathan, a corporate attorney who listened to my whole story on our third dinner together, and said, "That must have been terrifying. How did you get through it?" "Friends, therapy, work, time." I smiled. "And a really good lawyer. Everyone needs a really good lawyer." We took it slow. Very slow. But slow was good. Slow meant I had time to check, to verify, to make sure I wasn't falling into old patterns. Nathan was patient. Nathan understood. "I'm not him," he said once, when I'd pulled back from a casual comment about combining finances for a shared vacation. "I know," I said. "But I need to go slow anyway." "Then we'll go slow." 2 years after Marcus Michael went to prison, I got a letter from him. Vanessa advised me not to read it, but I did anyway. It was mostly self-justification. Claims that I'd been emotionally unavailable, that he'd felt like an accessory to my career, that the whole thing had been partly my fault for not paying attention. Classic narcissist deflection. But at the end, there was one line that felt almost genuine. "You were the one I almost stopped for. If that matters." I threw the letter away. It didn't matter. What mattered was the life I was rebuilding. The trust I was learning to have, not in partners specifically, but in my own judgment, my own ability to see clearly when I needed to. The understanding that being fooled once didn't make me a fool. It made me human. I still work in cybersecurity. Still teach people about social engineering, about how con artists exploit trust, about the importance of verification and vigilance. But now when I teach, I include my own story. Not for sympathy. For education. The best social engineering attack, I tell my students, is the one that makes you feel safe enough to stop looking for threats. And the strongest security posture is knowing that you're never immune. You just get better at recognizing patterns. Someone always asks, how do you trust anyone after something like that? Same way you trust anything, I say. You verify. You watch for patterns. You build trust slowly, over time, with evidence. And you know that trust isn't about being certain someone won't hurt you. It's about knowing you'll survive if they do. I survived. That's the story. Not the one about the man who fooled me, but the one about what I did when I found out. Not the betrayal, but the recovery. 3 years after everything, I'm okay. Better than okay. Wiser, maybe. Definitely more careful. But also more resilient, more aware of my own strength. And I never forget my passport anymore.